It's been 1 week since two children were found dead inside their home. Their mother confessed to killing her children. Alexa Ashwell joins us now with what we know about the case and the questions that still remain. Alexa?
Kai, Baltimore police say they have a confession, now waiting on the results of the medical examiner. This as we continue to push over whether this could have been prevented. It's been 1 week since siblings Davin and Neria Thomas were found dead inside their home, and little is known about what would drive their mother, Jamerria Hall, who is charged with their murders, to kill them. Court documents show the 28-year-old confessed to the crime. Why? Not detailed in the report. Just days ago, the community gathered outside their home here at the Coventry Apartments in Southwest Baltimore. Family present, but staying quiet.
To do this to her child, that just don't make any sense.
Simply incomprehensible. Court documents outline the horrific details of the case. 8-year-old Davin found dead in the living room. He had been stabbed. 6-year-old Neria found dead in the bathtub with a clothing object wrapped around her neck.
He was crying.
Neighbors revealing to police they heard who they thought was Neria screaming,
"Mommy, no, mommy. No, mommy."
This man telling Fox 45 News
I cried out. They was beating up in my ceiling.
at the time he thought the children were caught in the middle of a fight between their mother and a man.
I'm weeping. I'm weeping because the kid, she didn't have to kill them kids.
All this leading to questions about speaking up and intervention. Commissioner Michael Harrison detailing CPS is now involved in this investigation.
August 24th, 2021. A maintenance worker at Coventry Homes in Southwest Baltimore approaches apartment 1106. Residents have been complaining about a smell, something putrid, something wrong. He knocks. No answer. The odor grows stronger as he unlocks the door. What he discovers inside will haunt him for the rest of his life. In the living room, 8-year-old Davin Thomas lies, face down in a sleeping bag. A large knife protrudes from his chest. A plastic trash bag is wrapped around his head. In the bathroom, 6-year-old Neria Thomas lies in the bathtub. A clothing item is wrapped tightly around her neck. The children have been dead for days. Their mother, Jamerria Hall, is nowhere to be found. Just 5 days earlier, these children were alive. They were playing outside their apartment, accompanied by their 28-year-old mother, the same mother who had fought to regain custody of them after losing them once before. The same mother who, according to neighbors, seemed to be doing better. The same mother who would later look police officers in the eye and confess to killing them both. The contradiction is staggering. How does a woman fight through the court system to regain custody of her children, only to take their lives months later? What happens in the mind of a mother to transform her from protector to perpetrator? This case exposes a devastating failure, not just of one woman, but of an entire system designed to protect children. A system that returned Davin and Neria to a mother who would become their murderer. The timeline of events raises disturbing questions. On August 19th, neighbors reported hearing Neria's voice, high-pitched and terrified, screaming, "Mommy, no." It was the last time anyone would hear her voice. In the days that followed, Jamerria Hall was spotted walking erratically near North Avenue, visibly under the influence of something. Meanwhile, her children's bodies lay decomposing in the apartment. When police finally caught up with Jamerria on August 25th, she was in an Uber heading toward Baltimore County. What happened next shocked even hardened investigators. She waived her Miranda rights and provided a detailed confession of how she killed her own children. The confession itself reveals a disturbing clarity, a mother who knew exactly what she was doing as she ended the lives she had once created. The methodical nature of the killings, the specific weapons used, the attempts to conceal the evidence, all point to a level of awareness that makes this case all the more horrifying. Here at Crime Scene Exposed, we dive deep into the most infamous crimes and disturbing confessions from around the world. From high-profile murder trials to shocking cases like Jamerria Hall's that expose failures in our child protection systems, we uncover the truth through detailed investigation and gripping storytelling. If you value these in-depth analyses of real crimes, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to join our community. Have you ever wondered what warning signs might have been missed in cases like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As we examine the case of Jamerria Hall, we'll trace the path that led to this tragedy. We'll explore the previous incidents that should have served as red flags, the decision to return the children to her care, and the final days leading up to their deaths. We'll also look at the broader implications, how communities and systems can better protect vulnerable children from the very people who should love them most. The story of Davin and Neria Thomas isn't just a true crime case. It's a call to action, a demand that we do better for the children who depend on adults to keep them safe, even when those adults are their own parents.
There's breaking news in Baltimore. Horrific new information after a mother is charged with murdering her 2 children. Court documents show a neighbor may have unknowingly heard the moments leading up to the deaths of Davin and Neria Thomas. And just today, police released their mother's mugshot. Jamerria Hall is charged with murder. Now, we want to warn you, some of the details you're about to hear may be disturbing.
That's right. Alexa Ashwell begins our team coverage with the charging documents released today. Alexa, they are so disturbing.
Yes, Mary, these details in this document are horrific. It details how the children were found and that neighbors heard screams. What it doesn't say is why. Why kill these children? A question that remains.
That's what a neighbor told police. They heard 6-year-old Neria screaming from inside her home in southwest Baltimore August 19th, according to these court documents. The little girl and her brother Davin found dead inside the apartment 5 days later. 2 children now gone, according to police, at the hands of their mother, Jamerria Hall. Her charging documents detailing the shocking and disturbing details surrounding their murders. A case that began this past Tuesday when a maintenance worker discovered the children dead inside of their apartment in southwest Baltimore after being asked to investigate a foul smell coming from the unit. These court documents detailing Davin was found lying face down in a sleeping bag in the living room, a knife at that scene, and his sister in the bathtub with a clothing object wrapped around her neck, both in a state of decomposition and no sign of their mother. The documents detail Jamerria Hall was last seen with her 2 children on August 19th outside the residence. That same night, a neighbor told police they heard Neria screaming, "Mommy, no." Hall arrested the next day. According to the documents, a witness telling police she had gotten into an Uber and was heading for Baltimore County. There, she was taken into custody and later gave a full admission into detail as to how she murdered both of her children.
Davin and Neria Thomas never had the chance to grow up. At 8 and 6 years old, respectively, their lives were cut tragically short just as they were beginning to develop their own personalities, interests, and dreams. Davin, the older of the 2 siblings, was described by teachers as bright and curious. At 8 years old, he had just completed 2nd grade at a local Baltimore elementary school. Those who knew him mentioned his protective nature toward his younger sister. He enjoyed drawing and would often create colorful pictures that his teachers would display in the classroom. One neighbor recalled seeing him riding his bike in the courtyard of Coventry Homes, his laughter echoing between the buildings on summer afternoons. He was always watching out for his little sister, said one resident who lived in a neighboring unit. You'd see him holding her hand when they walked to the bus stop. He seemed like an old soul, like he understood he needed to look after her. Neria, just 6 years old, was known for her bright smile and energetic personality. She had recently finished kindergarten and was looking forward to 1st grade. With her hair often styled in colorful barrettes, she was described as a little ray of sunshine by a daycare worker who had previously cared for her. Neria loved singing and would often be heard humming to herself while playing outside. The siblings were inseparable. Despite the typical brother-sister squabbles, neighbors noted their close bond. They played together, ate together, and according to school records, would check on each other during the school day whenever possible. What many in the community didn't know was that Davin and Neria had already experienced significant trauma in their young lives. In 2018, 3 years before their deaths, they had been removed from Jamerria Hall's care following a disturbing incident. According to court records, Hall had attempted to burn down her mother's home with the children inside. This led to the children being placed in the care of relatives while Hall underwent court-mandated evaluations and treatment.
2018 charging documents. Hall set her mother's apartment on fire with the children inside. Those documents say that Hall was removing smoke detectors and destroying some of them, and then she lit photographs and other items on fire around the apartment. Police found her and the children at the hospital the next day. The children were questioned by the child abuse unit. I took these concerns up with an attorney about how that could possibly happen, how she could regain custody after all of that and given her documented past.
This evening I have
Neria Thomas Joy.
and I have
Davin Thomas.
The voices of two young siblings, now a haunting memory of their short lives. This recording from their mother Jamerria Hall's podcast, posted just a year before police say she killed them. And they say she had a history of violence.
They should have furthered the investigation because you set your own house on fire with your kids in it. So CPS should have took my opinion, CPS should have took the kids right away.
Brandon Dixon says he could hear arguments throughout the day and night coming from the apartment on Coventry Road. He says he usually saw Hall, her children, and a man sitting inside a car in the same spot all day. He noticed the car disappeared a few weeks back and saw the kids sitting by a stump by themselves.
I just seen the kids, so I kind of like got a little personal with them. Hey, how are you guys doing? I don't see your family out here no more. Normally you guys are in the car. And they just kind of like looked at me, like they didn't look happy at all.
This all started because of a complaint from neighbors about an odor coming from the apartment. That's when police were called and they made the gruesome discovery, and still today they are airing out the building.
A Maryland case search found that she pled guilty to first-degree arson for lighting her mother's house on fire with the children inside. She served a year in jail and was granted custody of the kids because the father didn't show up to a court hearing. Commissioner Harrison said the department would review Hall's child custody history as part of their investigation. But what's not clear is what action CPS or Child Protective Services took. Attorney Mark Sherman is not directly involved in the case, but he says usually CPS would have investigated after the 2018 charge of arson, a case he called undercharged.
Mental health is a huge problem these days, and I'm very sure mental health was a critical problem in this kind of situation here, unaddressed mental health problems. And so what we may have here is a situation where there was no proper CPS investigation done and no rehabilitation, no treatment, no accountability for what had been done in 2018, which sort of brought us here to today.
The details of how Hall regained custody remain somewhat obscured by confidentiality laws surrounding family court proceedings. What is known is that by early 2021, the children had been returned to her care. The decision came after Hall reportedly completed required programs and convinced authorities she was stable enough to parent. The family's apartment at Coventry Homes in southwest Baltimore was modest but adequate. Located in a multi-unit complex, the two-bedroom unit provided basic shelter for the small family. The neighborhood itself faced challenges common to many parts of Baltimore: limited resources, economic struggles, and periodic concerns about safety. Yet within this setting, neighbors recall seeing moments of apparent normalcy. Hall walking her children to the bus stop, the family returning with groceries, the children playing in the common areas. They seemed okay from the outside, said one neighbor who lived across the hall. The kids were always clean, had backpacks for school. You'd never guess what was happening behind closed doors. The apartment itself would later become a crime scene, its walls containing the final moments of two young lives. The living room where Davin once played with his toys became the place where his body would be discovered. The bathtub where Neria might have splashed and giggled during bath time became her final resting place. What happened within that apartment in August 2021 transformed it from a home into a memorial to two children who deserved so much more than the fate they received. The siblings who once brought life and energy to the halls of Coventry Homes would now exist only in the memories of those who knew them and in the tragic story of how systems meant to protect them ultimately failed. Davin and Neria Thomas, two children with personalities, potential, and promise, became victims not just of violence, but of a broken system that returned them to danger. At 28 years old, Jamerria Hall presented a complex and troubling profile, a woman whose path to motherhood was intersected by a parent's psychological struggles and concerning behavior that would eventually escalate to the unthinkable. Public records reveal limited information about Hall's early life and upbringing. Born and raised in Baltimore, she appears to have had a strained relationship with her own mother, though the full extent and nature of this relationship remains unclear. What is evident from court documents is that Hall's adult life was marked by instability and concerning incidents that repeatedly brought her to the attention of authorities. The first significant red flag in Hall's history as a mother came in 2018 when an alarming incident occurred that should have served as a watershed moment for intervention. According to police reports, Hall attempted to set fire to her mother's home, with her children, then ages 5 and 3, inside the residence. This shocking act of endangerment immediately triggered the involvement of Child Protective Services, resulting in Davin and Neria being removed from her care. Following this incident, Hall was required to undergo psychological evaluation. While the specific diagnoses remain protected by medical privacy laws, court testimonies reference significant psychological concerns and patterns of unstable behavior that required ongoing treatment. Hall was placed on medication and ordered to attend regular therapy sessions as conditions for potentially regaining custody of her children. During the period when her children were in the care of relatives, Hall's behavior continued to raise concerns. Social media posts from this time reveal erratic thinking and paranoid ideations. In one particularly troubling post, she wrote about feeling that the system was conspiring against her and that unnamed entities were watching her. These public declarations offered glimpses into her deteriorating psychological state, warning signs visible to anyone paying attention. Despite these concerning indicators, Hall began the process of regaining custody in late 2020. She attended court-mandated parenting classes, maintained a period of apparent stability, and convinced court evaluators that she was taking her medication consistently. According to one social worker who later spoke anonymously to local media, Hall presented well during supervised visits with her children and said all the right things during evaluations. The custody battle itself was less contentious than might be expected. While details remain limited due to the confidential nature of family court proceedings, it appears that the relatives who had been caring for Davin and Neria did not strongly oppose Hall's petition for reunification. Whether this was due to their own limitations, a belief in Hall's recovery, or other factors remains unclear. By early 2021, the court made the fateful decision to return Davin and Neria to their mother's care. The reunification process was gradual, beginning with increased visitation, then weekend stays, and finally full custody by spring 2021. Court documents indicate that this decision came with conditions. Hall was required to continue therapy, maintain stable housing, and allow periodic home visits from social workers. What happened in the months between reunification and the August murders suggests a woman whose stability was far more fragile than authorities recognized. Neighbors at Coventry Homes reported occasional concerning behavior. Hall sometimes appeared disoriented in common areas or would have animated conversations with herself. One neighbor recalled an incident in July 2021 when Hall was seen pacing in the parking lot at 3 a.m., appearing agitated and muttering to herself. Perhaps most troubling were the changes in Hall's social media presence during this period. Her posts became increasingly paranoid, with references to feeling threatened and needing to protect her children from unspecified dangers. In one post just weeks before the murders, she wrote cryptically about sacrifices that mothers sometimes need to make, a statement that would later take on horrifying significance. The question that haunts this case is how these warning signs went unaddressed. Did the mandated home visits actually occur? Were Hall's therapy appointments being monitored? Was anyone tracking whether she continued taking her medication? The system that deemed her fit to parent appears to have failed to maintain adequate oversight once the children were returned. The story of Jamerria Hall before August 2021 is one of missed opportunities and institutional failures. A mother with documented violent tendencies and psychological instability was given back the very children she had previously endangered, a decision that would ultimately cost Davin and Neria their lives. The final chapter in the lives of Davin and Neria Thomas unfolded over 7 critical days in August 2021, a week that began with the children alive and ended with their mother in handcuffs, having confessed to their murders. August 19th, 2021, the last day. Thursday, August 19th started as an ordinary summer day at Coventry Homes. The weather in Baltimore was warm and humid, typical for late August. Around 8:30 a.m., several residents reported seeing Jamerria Hall and her 2 children outside their apartment. One neighbor mentioned that the children appeared to be playing while Hall sat on a nearby bench, scrolling through her phone. They looked normal that morning, said a resident who lived in the same building. The kids were chasing each other around the courtyard. Jamerria was watching them, but she seemed distracted. By mid-afternoon, the family had returned to their apartment. What happened inside those walls over the next few hours would later be pieced together through Hall's confession and forensic evidence. At approximately 5:45 p.m., a pivotal moment occurred that would later haunt the entire community. A neighbor whose apartment shared a wall with Hall's reported hearing a child's voice, later identified as 6-year-old Neria, screaming, "Mommy, no." The neighbor, who asked not to be identified in police reports, described the scream as blood-curdling and filled with terror. "I almost called the police," the neighbor later told investigators. "But then everything went quiet, and I told myself it was probably just a kid not wanting to take a bath or something. I've replayed that moment in my head 1,000 times since." This scream, according to the medical examiner's report and Hall's subsequent confession, likely coincided with the beginning of the attack on the children. Based on the evidence, investigators believe Davin was killed first, followed by Neria. No one reported seeing or hearing from the children after this point.
Here at the Coventry Apartments in Southwest Baltimore, family present but staying quiet.
To do this to her child, that just don't make any sense.
Simply incomprehensible. Court documents outline the horrific details of the case. 8-year-old Davin found dead in the living room. He had been stabbed. 6-year-old Neria found dead in the bathtub with a clothing object wrapped around her neck.
He was crying.
Neighbors revealing to police they heard who they thought was Neria screaming,
"Mommy, no, mommy. No, mommy."
This man telling Fox 45 News
I cried out. They was beating up in my ceiling.
at the time he thought the children were caught in the middle of a fight between their mother and a man.
I'm weeping. I'm weeping because the kid, she didn't have to kill him.
August 20th to 23rd, 2021, the silent days. For the next 4 days, apartment 1106 at Coventry Homes remained quiet. Neighbors noted the absence of the usually active children, but didn't immediately raise alarms. In a community where many residents keep to themselves, the silence wasn't initially cause for concern. During this period, Jamerria Hall was seen leaving and returning to the apartment several times. Her behavior, according to witnesses, had noticeably changed. One resident observed her leaving the building at around 2 a.m. on August 21st, wearing mismatched clothing and muttering to herself. Another reported seeing her in the parking lot on August 22nd, appearing disoriented and under the influence of substances. "She wasn't making sense," said a neighbor who encountered her on August 22nd. "She kept saying something about being free now and doing what had to be done. I just assumed she was high on something." On August 23rd, Hall was spotted at a convenience store several blocks from Coventry Homes. The store's clerk later told police that she purchased cigarettes, a lighter, and several bottles of cleaning supplies. She appeared agitated and avoided eye contact during the transaction. Meanwhile, inside apartment 1106, the bodies of Davin and Neria were beginning to decompose in the summer heat. The air conditioning in the unit had been turned off, accelerating the process and eventually leading to the odor that would alert neighbors. August 24th, 2021, discovery. By Tuesday, August 24th, residents on the same floor as Hall's apartment had begun to notice a foul smell in the hallway. Several complaints were made to the building management, prompting them to send a maintenance worker to investigate. At approximately 1:15 p.m., the worker knocked on the door of apartment 1106. Receiving no response and noting the intensifying odor, he used his master key to enter the unit. The scene inside would forever change him. In the living room, he discovered the body of 8-year-old Davin, face down in a sleeping bag. A large knife protruded from the child's chest, and a plastic trash bag had been wrapped around his head and face. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition. Continuing through the apartment, the worker found 6-year-old Neria in the bathroom, lying face up in the bathtub. A clothing item, later identified as a shirt, was wrapped tightly around her neck. Like her brother, she had been dead for several days. The maintenance worker immediately exited the apartment and called 911. Police and emergency services arrived within minutes, securing what was now a double homicide scene. August 25th, 2021, arrest. As investigators processed the crime scene at Coventry Homes, the search for Jamerria Hall intensified. She had not returned to the apartment since the bodies were discovered. Baltimore police issued an alert with Hall's description to all units. The break came on the morning of August 25th, when an officer spotted a woman matching Hall's description walking erratically near North Avenue and Bloomingdale Road, approximately 2 miles from Coventry Homes. When approached, the woman initially gave a false name, but her identification was quickly confirmed as Jamerria Hall. Shortly after this initial contact, officers received information that Hall had ordered an Uber and was heading toward Baltimore County. Police intercepted the vehicle and took Hall into custody without incident at approximately 11:30 a.m. At the police station, Hall was read her Miranda rights. In a decision that surprised investigators, she immediately waived these rights and agreed to speak about what had happened to her children. What followed was a detailed confession that would form the cornerstone of the case against her. By the end of August 25th, just 6 days after Davin and Neria were last seen alive, their mother was in a cell at the Baltimore City Detention Center, charged with their murders. When Baltimore police entered apartment 1106 at Coventry Homes on August 24th, 2021, they encountered a scene that would test the emotional fortitude of even the most experienced officers. The modest two-bedroom unit had been transformed from a family home into a tableau of horror that told a story of calculated violence. The apartment itself was in disarray, though not from a struggle. Clothes were strewn across furniture, dirty dishes filled the sink, and garbage overflowed from the kitchen trash can. The air inside was stifling. The air conditioning had been turned off despite the August heat, accelerating decomposition and intensifying the odor that had alerted neighbors. In the living room, 8-year-old Davin Thomas lay face down in a blue sleeping bag positioned in the center of the floor. A large kitchen knife with a black handle was embedded in his back, penetrating through to his chest. A plastic trash bag had been wrapped around his head and secured with what appeared to be a hair tie. The medical examiner would later determine that the knife wound was the primary cause of death, though the bag would have caused suffocation had the stabbing not been fatal. The positioning of Davin's body suggested he may have been sleeping when attacked. There were no defensive wounds on his hands or arms, indicating he likely had no opportunity to fight back or protect himself. The sleeping bag was zipped up to his waist, further supporting the theory that he was asleep when his mother began her attack. In the bathroom, 6-year-old Neria was discovered in the bathtub. Unlike her brother, she was fully clothed, suggesting she had not been preparing for a bath when she was killed. Her body was positioned face up, with a t-shirt wrapped multiple times around her neck in a ligature pattern. The medical examiner would determine strangulation as her cause of death. The presence of petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes indicated she had struggled as oxygen was cut off, a detail that aligned with the neighbor's report of hearing her cry out. Forensic evidence painted a clearer picture of the sequence of events. Blood spatter analysis suggested Davin was attacked first while lying in the sleeping bag. The pattern of blood on the living room floor indicated he had not moved significantly after being stabbed, supporting the theory that he was asleep or at least lying down when attacked. The bathroom showed signs of a different scenario. Water splashed on the floor, and walls suggested Neria may have been in or near the tub when she was confronted. Scratch marks on the inside of the bathtub indicated she had struggled, her fingernails scraping against the porcelain as she fought for her life. The evidence suggested she had been conscious and aware during the attack, unlike her brother. Perhaps most disturbing were the attempts at cleaning that investigators documented. Bottles of bleach and other cleaning supplies were found in the kitchen, and traces of bleach were detected on the bathroom floor and around the bathtub. This indicated that after killing her children, Hall had made efforts to clean up evidence, a sign of awareness and understanding of her actions that would later factor into the prosecution's case. The crime scene also revealed something about Hall's activities in the days between the murders and discovery. Food wrappers and empty soda cans suggested she had remained in the apartment for at least some time after the killings. A notebook found on the kitchen table contained writings that appeared to be Hall's, including disturbing statements such as "they're safe now" and "I did what a mother had to do." From a psychological perspective, the crime scene offered troubling insights. The different methods used to kill each child, stabbing for Davin, strangulation for Neria, suggested a level of deliberation rather than a sudden, impulsive act. The cleaning attempts indicated awareness of wrongdoing. Most disturbing was the evidence that Hall had remained in the apartment with her dead children for some period before leaving. This wasn't a crime of sudden passion, noted one investigator. The evidence points to someone who knew what they were doing and took steps to cover it up afterward. That's what makes this case particularly disturbing, the level of awareness it suggests. The apartment at Coventry Homes, once a place where 2 children lived and played, had become a testament to the darkest possibilities of the human mind. A crime scene that revealed not just how Davin and Neria died, but the calculated nature of the violence that took their lives. As we've walked through the crime scene at Coventry Homes, we've seen the devastating final moments of 2 young lives. But what we haven't yet revealed is what happened inside Jamerria Hall's mind, the thoughts and motivations that led a mother to take such horrific actions against her own children. In the next segment, we'll share the details of Hall's confession, a statement so detailed and disturbing that it left investigators struggling to maintain their professional composure. Her words provide a rare and troubling glimpse into the mind of someone who committed filicide, the killing of one's own children, and the twisted reasoning she used to justify her actions. We'll also examine how she managed to regain custody despite clear warning signs and the systemic failures that allowed these children to slip through the cracks of a system designed to protect them. We're about to reveal the details of Jamerria's confession that shocked even veteran investigators. If you're from Baltimore or have followed this case, have you noticed changes in how child welfare cases are handled since this tragedy? Let us know where you're watching from and your thoughts on this case so far. Your perspectives might highlight important changes or concerning gaps in how communities across the country protect vulnerable children. Stay with us as we continue to uncover the truth behind this heartbreaking case and examine what it reveals about our child protection systems. The confession you're about to hear raises profound questions about mental health, parental rights, and the thresholds for intervention when children might be at risk. On August 25, 2021, less than 24 hours after her children's bodies were discovered, Jamerria Hall sat in an interrogation room at the Baltimore Police Department's Homicide Unit. Detective Marcus Taylor placed a Miranda rights waiver form in front of her. Without hesitation, Hall signed it, agreeing to speak without an attorney present, a decision that would provide investigators with one of the most disturbing confessions in recent Baltimore criminal history. "I want to tell you what happened to my babies," Hall reportedly said as the recording began. What followed was a 90-minute confession delivered with an unsettling calm that contrasted sharply with the horrific details she described. According to police records, Hall began by explaining that she had been planning the killings for several days. She claimed she had become convinced that her children were contaminated and that killing them was an act of protection rather than harm. This delusional thinking, while indicating severe mental health issues, also demonstrated premeditation, a crucial element for the first-degree murder charges that would follow. Hall described the events of August 19th in methodical detail. She recounted how she waited until Davin fell asleep in his sleeping bag in the living room. "He always liked sleeping there instead of his bed," she told detectives. She described retrieving a knife from a kitchen and standing over her son for a long time before stabbing him through the back with enough force that the knife penetrated his chest. She then placed a plastic bag over his head to make sure. Neneria's murder, as Hall described it, was more confrontational. The 6-year-old had been in the bathroom when Hall approached her. "She saw something in my face," Hall admitted. She knew something was wrong. When Hall grabbed her, Neria screamed, "Mommy, no," the cry that the neighbor had reported hearing. Hall described strangling her daughter with a T-shirt, tightening it until Neria stopped moving, then placing her body in the bathtub. Perhaps most disturbing was Hall's description of the days following the murders. She admitted to staying in the apartment with her children's bodies for nearly 2 days, at times talking to them as if they were still alive. She described attempts to clean the bathroom with bleach and her eventual decision to leave the apartment as the odor became overwhelming. When asked about her motive, Hall's response revealed the depth of her psychological disturbance. "I had to protect them from what was coming," she said. "They're safe now. No one can hurt them anymore." She expressed no remorse during the interview, maintaining that she had acted out of maternal love rather than malice. On August 26, 2021, the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office formally charged Jamerria Hall with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment. The first-degree murder charges reflected the prosecution's assessment that the killings were premeditated and deliberate rather than impulsive acts. Hall made her first court appearance on August 27th for a bail hearing. Given the severity of the charges and the confession already in evidence, the judge ordered her held without bail. Hall appeared disoriented during this hearing, at times smiling inappropriately and attempting to speak out of turn. As the case moved toward trial, Hall's public defender filed a motion for a competency evaluation. This standard procedure in cases involving potential mental illness would determine whether Hall was capable of understanding the charges against her and assisting in her own defense. The court granted this motion, and Hall was transferred to Clifton T. Perkins Hospital Center, Maryland's maximum security psychiatric hospital, for evaluation. After a 60-day observation period, doctors at Perkins submitted their report to the court. While the full contents remain sealed, court records indicate that Hall was found competent to stand trial, meaning that despite any mental illness, she understood the nature of the proceedings against her and could participate in her defense. This finding set the stage for the next phase of legal proceedings. Hall's defense team began preparing for what would likely be an insanity defense, arguing that at the time of the killings, Hall suffered from a mental disorder that prevented her from understanding the criminality of her actions or conforming her conduct to the requirements of the law. The prosecution, led by Assistant State's Attorney Elizabeth Stock, prepared to counter this defense with evidence of premeditation, including Hall's attempts to clean the crime scene and her detailed recollection of the murders. They also planned to introduce evidence from the 2018 incident when Hall had attempted to burn down her mother's home with the children inside, establishing a pattern of endangerment rather than an isolated psychotic episode. As of early 2022, the case remains in the pretrial phase, with both sides filing motions and preparing for what will likely be one of Baltimore's most high-profile murder trials in recent years. Hall continues to be held at the Baltimore City Detention Center, awaiting her day in court and the justice that Davin and Neria deserve. The murders of Davin and Neria Thomas represent more than just a horrific crime. They expose catastrophic failures within the very systems designed to protect vulnerable children. As details of the case emerged, troubling questions arose about how a mother with Jamerria Hall's history could regain custody of children she had previously endangered. The most glaring red flag in Hall's history occurred in 2018 when she attempted to burn down her mother's home with Davin and Neria inside. This incident triggered immediate intervention from Child Protective Services, CPS, resulting in the children being removed from Hall's custody and placed with relatives. This action, swift and appropriate, should have marked the beginning of a careful, thorough process before any consideration of reunification. Yet somehow, less than 3 years later, these same children were back in the care of the woman who had endangered their lives. The decision to return Davin and Neria to Hall followed what appears to have been a superficial evaluation process. Court records indicate that Hall completed parenting classes and maintained a period of apparent stability, but crucial questions remain about the depth of the psychological evaluation she underwent. In cases involving attempted harm to children, the bar for reunification should be extraordinarily high, explained Dr. Margaret Wilson, a child welfare expert who reviewed the case details. The system appears to have prioritized family reunification over child safety, which is a fundamental misalignment of priorities. The failure extends beyond just the decision to reunite the family. Once the children were returned to Hall's care, the monitoring and follow-up appear to have been inadequate. While court orders mandated continued therapy and home visits, there is little evidence these requirements were consistently enforced or that anyone was tracking Hall's compliance with medication regimens that might have stabilized her mental health. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott addressed these systemic failures in a press conference following the murders. "We cannot allow children to fall through the cracks like this," he stated. "Every agency that touched this family needs to examine what went wrong and how we can prevent such tragedies in the future. These deaths were preventable, and that's what makes them all the more heartbreaking." Perhaps the most insightful commentary came from Adam Rosenberg, Vice President of Violence Intervention and Prevention at LifeBridge Health. Rosenberg emphasized that child protection cannot be the sole responsibility of CPS. It requires community-wide vigilance and action. "The anger and accountability should be directed at all of us," Rosenberg stated. Neighbors who heard concerning sounds, relatives who may have noticed troubling behavior, professionals who interacted with this family, we all share responsibility for protecting children. CPS is just one piece of a much larger safety net that clearly failed these children. Rosenberg's comments highlight a crucial truth. The system failed not just through the actions of individual agencies, but through a collective inability to connect the dots. Warning signs were visible to different people at different times, but no mechanism existed to bring these observations together into a cohesive picture of a family in crisis. The case exposed specific procedural failures as well. The threshold for removing children from a home is appropriately high, but the threshold for returning them to a parent with a history of violence should be equally rigorous. Instead, the system appeared to operate on a presumption of reunification rather than a careful assessment of risk. In the aftermath of the murders, Baltimore's Department of Social Services announced a comprehensive review of all cases involving children returned to parents with histories of violence or severe mental illness. The department also implemented new protocols requiring more frequent home visits and better coordination between mental health providers and child welfare workers. These changes, while important, came too late for Davin and Neria. Their deaths stand as a stark reminder that systems are only as effective as their implementation, and that when it comes to child protection, the cost of failure is measured in lives lost. The murders of Davin and Neria Thomas represent a tragic intersection of mental health crisis and child protection failure. Their deaths weren't just the result of one woman's actions. They were the culmination of missed opportunities, overlooked warning signs, and systemic gaps that allowed two vulnerable children to remain in danger. Filicide, the killing of one's own child, is a crime that defies our most basic understanding of the parent-child relationship. Yet it occurs with disturbing frequency, with research indicating that between 400 to 500 children are killed by their parents annually in the United States. Understanding the warning signs and risk factors is crucial for prevention. In Jamerria Hall's case, multiple red flags were visible long before the murders occurred. Her previous attempt to harm her children by setting fire to a home they were in represented the most obvious danger signal. This wasn't merely concerning behavior. It was a direct indication of lethal intent that should have permanently altered how authorities assessed her relationship with her children. Beyond this dramatic incident, other warning signs were present. All social media posts revealed increasingly paranoid thinking. Neighbors observed erratic behavior. Her apparent substance abuse in the weeks before the murders suggested deteriorating stability. Each of these signals, viewed in isolation, might not have triggered intervention. Collectively, they painted a picture of a mother in crisis. Dr. Susan Hatters-Friedman, a leading researcher on maternal filicide, identifies several risk categories that professionals and community members should be alert to. First, acute psychosis, when a parent loses touch with reality and may develop delusional beliefs about their children needing to be saved through death. Second, fatal maltreatment, when abuse or neglect escalates to lethal levels, often in parents with histories of violence. Third, unwanted children, when parents view their children as obstacles or burdens. Fourth, revenge, when a parent kills to punish the other parent, often in custody disputes. Fifth, altruistic filicide, perhaps the most complex category, where a parent kills believing death is in the child's best interest. Hall's case appears to combine elements of acute psychosis and altruistic filicide, as she claimed to be protecting her children from perceived threats. Communities can better protect vulnerable children through several key strategies. Integrated support systems are essential. Mental health services must coordinate with child welfare agencies, creating a safety net that catches families before crisis points. Baltimore has begun implementing such coordination in the wake of this case, requiring mental health providers to alert child welfare workers when parents of minor children miss appointments or stop medication. Neighbors and community members need clear pathways to report concerns. Many people hesitate to call authorities about troubling behavior, fearing they might be overreacting or causing unnecessary trouble. Public education campaigns can help people recognize warning signs and understand reporting as an act of community care rather than interference. For those concerned about a child's welfare, resources exist that don't immediately trigger family separation. Family crisis hotlines, community health workers, and early intervention programs can provide support before situations become dangerous. The National Parent Helpline 1-855-427-2736 offers emotional support and resources to parents under stress. Child welfare policies need recalibration to better balance family preservation with child safety. While reunification is often the goal, cases involving previous violence or psychosis require specialized assessment protocols and more intensive monitoring. Schools, healthcare providers, and other professionals who interact with children need better training to recognize signs of family distress. In Hall's case, the children's teachers might have been positioned to notice concerning changes in behavior that could have indicated problems at home. The prevention of filicide requires a community-wide commitment to family support and child protection. It means creating systems where parents in crisis can seek help without fear, where children's safety is prioritized, and where the responsibility for protection is shared by all who touch a family's life. The deaths of Davin and Neria Thomas should serve as a catalyst for change, a painful reminder that when it comes to protecting children, the cost of system failure is measured in lives cut tragically short. As we conclude this examination of the Jamerria Hall case, we're left with the haunting images of two young lives, Davin and Neria Thomas, who deserved so much more than their tragic fate. Two children who should be growing, learning, and playing today are instead memorialized through a case that exposes profound failures in our systems of protection. The ripple effects of this tragedy continue to be felt throughout Baltimore. At Coventry Homes, a small memorial of stuffed animals and children's drawings appeared outside apartment 1106 in the days following the discovery. teachers at the children's school held a remembrance ceremony, sharing stories of Davin's artistic talents and Neria's infectious laugh. These small tributes cannot restore what was lost, but they ensure that these children are remembered not just for how they died, but for who they were. In response to this case, Baltimore has implemented several significant changes to its child welfare protocols. The Department of Social Services now requires more rigorous psychological evaluations before reunification in cases involving previous violence. A new multi-agency review team examines all high-risk cases, bringing together perspectives from mental health, education, and child protection professionals. Additionally, the city has expanded its crisis response teams to provide immediate intervention when parents show signs of psychological distress. These changes represent important progress, but the true measure of their effectiveness will be in the children whose names we never learn because they were protected before tragedy struck. If this story affected you, please consider liking and subscribing to Crime Scene Exposed. More importantly, share this video with someone who might need to recognize these warning signs in families around them. What do you think could have been done differently to save Davin and Neria? Your insights in the comments below might help prevent similar tragedies in the future. The story of Jamerria Hall and her children is not just a true crime case, it's a call to collective responsibility. It reminds us that child protection isn't just the job of government agencies, it's a community obligation that requires vigilance, compassion, and action from all of us. For every child like Davin and Neria, there are others still living in situations of escalating danger. Their safety may depend on a neighbor who notices concerning behavior, a teacher who spots signs of distress, or a relative who takes action rather than hoping things will improve on their own. In memory of Davin and Neria Thomas, let us commit to creating communities where no child's cry for help goes unanswered.